Welcome back to Relearn Relationships. This podcast episode is completely unscripted. It's going to be a little update on life and some thoughts I've had about relationships recently. I just laughed at myself a little bit after I recorded that intro because every single one of my podcasts are unscripted. Sometimes I'll make a note to myself for the topic. I'll have an idea and then I'll be like, oh, I need to go record this. But I don't actually script out anything. I've never been very good at following a script, even when I will do presentations and teach master classes. I find if I put too much on the slide, I just read the slide. And it's the same way if I make too many notes, I find myself just reading the notes. And I don't know, I think personally it's more fun when things are unscripted, which is one thing I love about podcast interviews. I haven't been doing that with this podcast, but another podcast I used to have, Growth Over Easy, still out there. I would interview people and I really enjoyed letting the conversation naturally flow. Maybe a few, targeted questions here and there if there were topics we were trying to cover or to get the conversation started. But I'm just someone who doesn't particularly script things. The last month has been a lot of transition, some changes in business for me. I am working with one of my closest friends. We have a new company, Relational Somatics, where we are facilitating trainings and like some educational trainings for other practitioners who want to be trauma informed or trauma trained in a somatic setting. So we're doing somatics, we're also bringing in a cognitive piece. And I'm just really excited about what's to come. And if you want to follow along, I'll put the Instagram handle in the show notes. And you can also see our website through there. And we'll have a masterclass coming up. It'll be completely free towards the end of the month. If you're curious, if you are someone who works in the healing and helping world and you want to know more about trauma. So, a couple of thoughts I've had recently about relationships. This one came to me. I don't want to even say I was in meditation because I don't actually remember what I was doing, but I was taking just some stillness time by myself. And randomly, the thought dropped in, I have boundaries and people still like me. Now, for someone who is a recovering people pleaser and really struggles with the fear of being misunderstood, which is an interesting fear to struggle with when you put yourself out there on the internet because people will misunderstand you and you will trigger people unintentionally, and sometimes they will get very upset. And this has happened. And this thought came to me, and more even in the context of my personal life, because I used to think boundaries were mean, that boundaries were bad. And then I went through a period of life, actually, it was all during 2020 mostly, where I had to start setting boundaries with people I really loved in my life because the relationships were just not working for either of us. And I felt so mean setting some of these boundaries, not because they were cruel or anything like that, just because I'd never drawn a line before. I'd always been very porous with my boundaries because, again, people pleaser. I want to help people. I don't want anyone not to like me. And that's really what it comes down to. People pleasing, I believe, is a form of manipulation. And we're manipulating others into liking us. We want their approval. We want them to be okay with us. I'd like to say it was altruistic and I just, wanted everyone to be happy because I cared about people, which is true. But if I went a few layers deeper, it was more that I feared people not liking me. I didn't want to live with that. So once I started setting boundaries and I started to see a positive change in my life, especially in those relationships, I was able to set more boundaries and I was able to kind of extend that to other areas. And honestly, the hardest area for my personally on setting boundaries was my professional life. I have gotten to the point where relational boundaries, like interpersonal relationships with friends, family, significant others, that's not very difficult for me anymore. Professional boundaries can still challenge me. And it wasn't that long ago, I had to start setting some professional boundaries. And I was very concerned about what the outcome might be. And as often happens, the outcome is much better than my fears. And then, like I said, not long ago, during kind of a stillness, contemplative state, this little sentence just dropped into my mind. I have boundaries and people still like me. And I wanted to share that because I know there are other people out there like me who fear upsetting others. Now, this is a really natural thing to fear because if you think about it, we're humans, we're pack animals. Look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, love and belonging. We are wired to want to fit in with others. I was listening to a podcast recently and they were talking about a psychological study that was done where they had 8 people. I want to say it was around 8 people. Okay, don't quote me directly. But essentially, they brought all these participants into a room. Now, in reality, there was only one participant. Everyone else was in on this test, and they would show a picture of a triangle, and they would go around the room, and all of the quote participants who were in on the study would look at the triangle and say it's a square. So then it finally got to the person who was the test subject, and they said it was a square as well. And obviously with the study, they found that, wow, like what people see versus what they will say can be swayed by whether or not, other people approve of that answer, essentially. So if everyone around me says it's a square, in order to be safe and fit in, I'm going to agree with them. I don't want to be the lone wolf, right? I'm a pack animal. I want to be part of the pack. And I thought that was a really interesting study for one, but it makes sense because as humans, we want to belong. Now, I hope that if I'm ever in that situation and I see that something is clearly not what everyone is saying it is, that I speak up and use my voice. But when I really struggled with people pleasing and not having boundaries, I can see where someone would fall into that because you want to be connected to others. You want to be approved of. And there's this sense inside of us when we start setting boundaries or we decide we need to that I might lose this connection. And I felt that a lot. It was that anxious feeling. I would get it in my chest and in my stomach. And it was this fear of rejection, really, that if I say what needs to be said, if I set a boundary, if I hold a standard, I'm going to lose connection. I'm going to be rejected from this relationship. And what helped me get through that was realizing that these relationships that I was worried about ruining with boundaries were not really relationships because I wasn't in integrity with my values. I wasn't being authentic. I was showing someone else this counterfeit version of myself and trying to mold myself into someone that I thought was more likable, more lovable. And again, people pleasing is a form of manipulation because you're not being honest. And so for me personally, when I started to look at it that way, of by not having boundaries, I'm not being honest because I'm not okay with the current state of this relationship. I'm not okay with how this person is behaving towards me in a relationship. And if I continue to let this go on without setting a standard, without using my voice, then I'm choosing this. And this is not what I want. And if I'm choosing something I don't want, that's not authentic. And so, again, as I started to set those boundaries, I realized people still like me. It's okay. Now, it doesn't mean every relationship will last when you start setting boundaries. It doesn't mean that every person is just going to be okay with you. But I'm willing to bet that you may be surprised that when you start to hold a standard for yourself and a standard by which you will be treated, that the good ones stick around and people start to respect you more. And this happened in my family where I had to set some strong boundaries with my mom years ago because of just some things that were going on in our family and in life. And everyone started respecting me a little more. I think at first they thought I was kind of a hard ass, to be honest, but then they started to see it. And the boundaries that I set created some big change within my family that turned out to be a beautiful, beautiful thing. If you're in that space, I just want to share that idea with you to maybe contemplate for yourself that I can have boundaries and people still like me and they might even respect me more. Another thing that I saw probably posted somewhere that really stood out to me was a quote by Teddy Roosevelt. And I'm going to read it to you. It says, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, who, at the best, knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring great." I think in relationships, we hold ourselves back for a couple of reasons: fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability. And I love that quote because it's easy to worry about getting it wrong. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I do the wrong thing? What if people get mad? What if people judge? What will they think? And it's about daring greatly. I love what he says, that it's not the critic who counts. It's not the people who are looking at you and judging you. It's the fact that you put yourself out there in the arena. It's the fact that you use your voice. And hate never comes from above anyways. So if you're trying to do anything in life, regardless if it has to do with relationships, remember that. The people who are judging and hating, that's more a reflection of what they think about themselves than what they think about you. But what I love about this quote in terms of relationships is it can be messy when you start voicing your needs and your desires in a relationship. It can be messy when you start setting boundaries and holding standards. It can be messy when you decide to share something with your partner and you're fumbling over your words because your emotions are so strong, but you know you need to get it out. And having a really great relationship, that doesn't just happen. At least I haven't met anyone that that's just happened for. And if you find that person, send them to me because I have questions. But having a great relationship requires really uncomfortable conversations. It requires taking a long, hard look at ourselves and our growth edges and our ugly parts. And it's not easy. It's just not. It's not easy to be in a long-term relationship because you constantly have this mirror from this other person that is going to show you all the areas in life where you have a fear of rejection, of vulnerability, of abandonment. And in order to have long-term lasting love, it's daring greatly. It's getting in the arena. It's putting yourself out there. It's using your voice again and again and again. And so I wanted to share that with you because when I read that quote, I had that little fire inside of me. I was like, "Oh, yes. I love this. I'm pumped up. This is a great quote." So I wanted to share it because maybe you'll have that same feeling and sensation, maybe you won't. But just as a reminder that if you are someone who's like, "Oh, I see all these perfect relationships online. My relationship sucks. My relationship this," that great relationships don't just happen. They are built. And nobody is showing you the ugly parts on the internet. Nobody. I mean, I talk about how, I have struggles in my own relationship, but I don't get on here and, list them off one by one because I value my privacy and my partner's privacy. But we're all struggling. We all have things that drive us crazy or areas where we need to learn how to communicate better or regulate our emotions more and not project so much. It's all messy. All of it. All the relationships. There is some mess. So it's not about having this perfect relationship. It's about putting yourself in the arena and showing up every day, even when it's uncomfortable, and continuing to dare greatly. The last thing I want to share today, another thought I've had lately about relationships, is about letting go. It's about releasing the expectation around an experience or a relationship. It's about being open to the possibility that love is available and love is always around you. And I think we white knuckle connection a lot of the time because, again, we fear rejection, we fear abandonment, we fear vulnerability, we fear dying alone. And that attachment to a particular outcome can really cloud our vision because sometimes we don't see everything around us when we're so focused on something going our way. And this is a struggle for me. I I will have moments where I will set high expectations and then I feel devastated because it didn't turn out the way I planned in my head. And it's it's kind of funny. I love surprises, and one of the reasons I love surprises is because I don't have any time to set an expectation for the surprise, right? If someone's like, "Oh, we're going to do this, it's a surprise." Now, I guess I could build up the idea of the surprise in my head, but I don't do that. So we could go like for a hike and be like, "Oh, this was the surprise." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this was so much fun." But if they had told me like, "Oh, we're just going to go for a hike," then I would have thought about how perfect this hike is going to be. And I feel like this on the hike and we do this on the hike, and hike might not be the best example, but I start to set these expectations in my head for how I want things to go. And then I get really disappointed when they don't go my way. And this is something I'm actively working on, this kind of emotional wave of setting an expectation and then being upset when it's not met. That is my own challenge in life that I am constantly working on handling better and not setting. And what helps me is releasing. It's detachment. Now, detachment doesn't mean you don't care. That is not what being detached means. Detachment means trusting that it's going to be okay. Trusting that what's for you will not pass you by. Trusting that God's got this. Like that's detachment. And so I free myself from expectation when I lean into detachment and I trust the process. And that has helped me so much in my personal life, my career life, my life in general. And maybe it will be helpful to you too. Because when you try to white knuckle your life, when you hold so tightly to your plans, it feels really crappy when you don't get what you want. But when you're open to the possibility that what's for you will never pass you by, you're open to the possibility that things will turn out exactly the way they need to, when you're open to the possibility that it's this or something better, life really opens up. So I wanted to share those things with you today. The Teddy Roosevelt quote, letting go, setting boundaries. And I'd love to know if you like this style of podcast. Typically, I have one point I talk about very succinctly. This was a little bit more flowy and all over the place. So I'd love your feedback and I would love to connect with you. So if you get this through Substack, it's in your inbox, just hit respond. Let me know what you think on the email. If you're listening to this somewhere else like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, thank you so much. I'd love for you to leave a review, give me some stars. I love 5, but hey, you got to do whatever is honest for you. And again, if you want to learn more about relational somatics, the Instagram handle is in the show notes, and there will be so much more to come about that soon. I hope you have a great week, and I hope you choose growth.